Hey y'all. So this was an article I pulled up about Jeffrey Epstein. The Daily Beast at one point had like a six-part series, and for whatever reason, it's no longer on the website. I think he basically went into the editor. I think it's Tina Brown, maybe. It just basically told her if they didn't pull the article that he was going to sue. So I don't know if that's what happened, but anyway, Conchita Sarnoff, she was I think the original author. And anyway, so this is just one of the other articles because Jeffrey Epstein does not need to die. The story I'm saying. But anyway, let's read this. It says billionaire Jewish pedophile Jeffrey Epstein goes free. This is from New York. Wednesday, July 21st, 12:05 a.m. I'm not sure what date, like what year this was written, but anyway, it says New York. Hedge fund mogul Jeffrey Epstein becomes a free man today, 5 years after he was first accused of sexually abusing underage girls. After months of reporting, the Daily Beast Conchita Sarnoff reveals exclusive details of the investigation and legal wrangling that saved him from a long prison term. She reports Palm Beach's police chief objected to Epstein's special treatment and gave the Daily Beast an exclusive look at his 9 hour deposition about the investigation. Earlier versions of the U.S. Attorney's charge, including a sealed 53-page indictment, could have landed Epstein in prison for 20 years. Victims alleged that Epstein molested underage girls from South Africa, Europe, and the former Soviet republics, including three 12-year-old girls brought over from France as a birthday gift. The victims also alleged trips out of state and abroad on Epstein's private jets, which would be evidence of sex trafficking, a much more serious federal crime than the state charges Epstein was convicted of. Epstein's attorneys investigated members of the Palm Beach Police Department, while others ordered private investigators to follow and intimidate the victims' families. One even posed as a police officer. Then Attorney General Alberto Gonzales told the Daily Beast that he would have instructed the Justice Department to pursue justice without making a political mess. Film director Roman Polanski is not the only convicted pedophile to walk free this month and return to life of privilege. On Wednesday, hedge fund manager Jeffrey Epstein completes his 1 year house arrest in Palm Beach, which has been even less arduous than Polanski's time at a Swiss ski chalet. During Epstein's term of house arrest, he made several trips each month to his New York home and his private Caribbean island. In the earlier stage of his sentence for soliciting prostitution with the minor, 13 months in the Palm Beach stockade, he was allowed out to his office each day. Meanwhile, Epstein has settled more than a dozen lawsuits brought by the underage girls who were recruited to perform massages at his Palm Beach mansion. 7 victims reached a last minute deal last week, days before a scheduled trial. Each received well over $1 million in amount that will hardly dent Epstein's $2 billion net worth. Let me make this just a little bigger because even with the glasses, it still seems so small. If it'll go bigger. Oh well. With that, the known victims of Epstein's sexual compulsion have been officially silenced, and the case against him is closed unless new ones come forward. According to banking sources, he has become or been moving assets out of the U.S. and may well follow Polanski into a luxurious exile. But the question remains, did Epstein's wealth and social connections, former President Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, and former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers were just a few of the prominent passengers on his private jets, allow him to receive only a slap on the wrist for crimes that carry a mandatory 20-year sentence. Was he able, with his limitless assets and heavy hitting lawyers, Alan Dershowitz, Gerald Lefkowitz, Roy Black, Kenneth Starr, Guy Lewis, and Martin Weinberger, among them to escape equal justice. Michael Reeder, the former Palm Beach police chief, certainly thinks so. He gave the Daily Beast exclusive access to the transcripts of his 9-hour deposition for the victims' civil suits, in which he explained how the case against Epstein was minimized by the state attorney's office, then bargained down by the U.S. Department of Justice, all in an atmosphere of hardball legal tactics and social pressures so intense that Reeder became estranged from several colleagues. At the time, Reeder, who retired in 2009 and now runs his own security firm, objected both to Epstein's plea agreement and to the flexible terms of his incarceration in the county jail rather than state prison. Asked during the deposition whether he thought Epstein received special treatment, he answered yes. In March 2005, Reeder's department, acting on a complaint from the Florida parents of a 14-year-old girl, launched an investigation that would eventually uncover a pattern of predatory behavior stretching back years and spanning several continents, knowingly enabled by Epstein's associates and employees. 2 or 3 times a day, whenever Epstein was in Palm Beach, a teenage girl would be brought to the mansion on El Brillo Way. The younger, the better, he instructed Haley Robeson, a local teenager who was paid to bring other girls to the house and who declared on a police tape that she was like a Heidi Fleiss, the infamous California madam, advised that she would be giving a massage. The girl was then pressured to remove her clothes, submit to fondling and a large vibrator, and sometimes lured into more invasive sexual contact. Each girl was paid $200 or more, depending on how far things went, by house manager Alfredo Rodriguez, who was instructed always to have $2,000 cash on hand. The Palm Beach Police Department identified 17 local girls who had contact with Epstein before the age of consent. The youngest was 14, and many were many were younger than 16. At that was just at one of Epstein's many homes around the world. He also owns property in New York, Santa Fe, Paris, London, and the Caribbean. Subsequent investigation by the FBI, reaching as far back as 2001, identified roughly 40 victims, not counting Nadia Marcinkova, whom Epstein referred to as his Yugoslavian sex slave. What? Because he had imported her from the Balkans at age 14. Now 24, Marcinkova became a member of the household and is alleged to have participated in the sexual contact with underage girls. Epstein quickly got wind of the investigation, and progress on the case got messy very quickly. He hired a squad of lawyers and private investigators and dispatched influential friends to pressure the police into backing off. Instead, local detectives pressed on and brought the matter to the attention of the FBI. The detectives asked their federal colleagues whether the fact that some victims appeared to have traveled out of state on Epstein's plane, plus the use of interstate phone services to arrange assignations, might be violations of the federal 2000 Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which carries a minimum sentence of 20 years. Florida enacted the federal TVPA in 2002. So when State Attorney Barry Kreischer, whatever, who also ran Florida's Crimes Against Children unit, proved reluctant to mount a vigorous prosecution of Epstein, saying the local victims were not credible witnesses, Chief Reeder wrote the attorney a letter complaining of the state's highly unusual conduct and asking him to remove himself from the case. He did not, and the evidence his office presented to a state grand jury produced only a single count of soliciting prostitution. Kreischer has since retired and would not comment for this article. The day after the indictment was returned, Reeder was relieved to have the FBI step in and take over the investigation. The details that eventually emerged were often shocking and occasionally bizarre. For Epstein's birthday one year, according to allegations in a civil suit, he was presented with three 12-year-old girls from France who were molested, then flown back to Europe the next day. The same civil complaints allege that young girls from South America, Europe, and the former Soviet republics, few of whom spoke English, were recruited for Epstein's sexual pleasure. According to a former bookkeeper, a number of the girls worked for MC2, the modeling agency owned by Jean-Luc Brunel, a longtime acquaintance and frequent guest of Epstein's. Brunel received $1 million from the billionaire around the time he started the agency. The non-prosecution agreement executed between Epstein and the Department of Justice states that Epstein and four members of his staff were investigated for knowingly in affecting interstate and foreign commerce, recruiting, enticing, and obtaining by any means a person knowing that person has not yet attained the age of 18 years and would be caused to engage in commercial sex act, that is child sex trafficking. Yet the agreement allowed Epstein to plead guilty to only two lower level state crimes, soliciting prostitution and soliciting a minor child for prostitution. Although the police investigation was officially closed, Chief Reeder tried to stay abreast of the federal case against Epstein. He was particularly concerned that Epstein be registered as a sex offender, which was part of the final deal, and that a fund be set up to compensate his victims, which was not, although Epstein agreed to bankroll their civil lawsuits. Attorney Dershowitz says Epstein's agreement to pay attorney fees for the victims and agreed to civil damage claims without admitting guilt amounted to extortion under threat of criminal prosecution. But exactly which crimes did the Department of Justice threaten to prosecute? The Daily Beast has learned that there were several earlier versions of the U.S. Attorney's charges, including 53-page indictment that, had he been convicted, could have landed Epstein in prison for 20 years. Brad Edwards, attorney for 7 of the victims, confirms the existence of an earlier draft of the non-prosecution agreement, officially under seal, in which it appears that Epstein committed at some point to a 10-year federal sentence. But in the end, Epstein's legal team refused that deal and threatened to proceed to trial. And that's where the question of whether the case was winnable before a jury again came into play, according to a source in the U.S. Attorney's Office, which shared the state attorney's view that the prosecution was far from a slam dunk. For one, it was clear from the start that Epstein would spare no legal expense and that his team of veteran lawyers, whose cases ranged from O.J. Simpson to the investigation of Clinton's relationship with an intern, would play rough. When the Palm Beach police started to identify victims, according to Detective Joe Ricari's report, Dershowitz began sending the detective Facebook and MySpace posts to demonstrate that some of these girls were no angels. Reeder's deposition also states that he heard from local private investigators that Dershowitz had launched background checks on both the police chief and Detective Ricari. Dershowitz denies all of that. According to Reeder, both he and Ricari also became aware that they were under surveillance for several months without knowing who ordered it, and the Florida victims began to complain that they and their family members were being followed and intimidated by private investigators who were then linked to local attorneys in Epstein's employ. In one reported instance, the private investigator claimed to be a police officer, and Reeder considered filing witness tampering charges. The credibility of the victims was also an issue. They had never complained of their treatment by Epstein until they were contacted by police, and they may have voluntarily returned to the Palm Beach mansion several times. Many of the girls came from disadvantaged backgrounds or broken homes, and they were susceptible to Epstein's cash, intimidation, and charm. Those who were 16 when they went to El Brillo Way uh, would have been in their 20s by the time they took the stand, and Epstein's investigators had dredged up every instance of bad behavior in their past. According to an exchange in the reader deposition, a few of the victims had worked in West Palm Beach at a massage parlor known as Jack Shacks. Each new compromising detail was immediately forwarded to the state attorney's office, where staff met frequently with Epstein's lawyers. I'm going to stop it right here and just continue on. But anyway, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.